Hi, welcome to our 12-minute conversation of Operationally Speaking. I'm Sergiu Simmel, Principal EOS Implementer at Get Business Momentum.
And I am Paul Marston, the owner and CEO of Abenaki Carriers. And more precisely, I'm the integrator and visionary at my transportation company, which has been running on EOS, the Entrepreneur's Operating System, for several years now.
And I've had the pleasure and the literally delight to be Abenaki's EOS Implementer. Now, our conversation today will be focused on, so what are we dealing with today in our weekly pulsing meeting? So ready to get going, Paul?
I could be cynical and say, well, what are we dealing with today, Sergio? But yes, absolutely. I'm ready when you are.
All right, that's great. So, in my experience, and I've been doing this for about 7 years almost, and of course, tens and tens of companies taken through the EOS process. And I've also, of course, attended many of their weekly policy meetings, level 10 meetings. What I've actually noticed is that people tend naturally, when they have a list of things they have to choose what they're going to focus on, is to do it in one of several ways. One is to actually just start from the top. These are the systematic groups. We're going to start from the top. I'm going to go through everything, and by Gal, we're not going to leave in the room until we finish, right? So that's one method. Not too productive, as you can imagine. Another matter is, and this is actually reflects people's natural tendencies. Let's get the small stuff out of the way. They have like all these little things and so forth. So what happens is that they always do that. So the world is not lacking small things, right? So they always have these small things actually added to the list, and they always focus on those. So the small things always get done. And guess what? Those big, fundamental, somewhat uncomfortable issues, they never get to it. All right? So that's another method. A third one is, sort of like the benevolent dictatorship model. The boss's favorites. Whatever the boss says, and in your company, you're the boss, Paul, right? Whatever the boss says, that's what we're going to focus on. Right. So I don't know whether that's your approach. Is that your approach?
That is, I would say that is not intentionally my approach.
Mm-hmm.
And that, but a leader has to be careful that he gets called out by his team, that is not leading so much that he's blind to the real issues of his team. So I think I embrace EOS principles because I tend to be more collaborative in my leadership style. And the beauty of taking the time to poll the team in, what are the issues out there? What are the issues? So you get it. Putting an issue on the issues list doesn't mean it's going to go on there this second, like we're going to talk about it this second. Mm-hmm. So we may have a quiet person on the leadership team who's got 3 issues up there. Well, those issues stay up there. And then all of a sudden somebody else says, hey, can we talk about that issue, the one you raised? That's kind of interesting to me this week. It might have gone on there 3 weeks ago. And all of a sudden that quiet person's issue is now front and center.
Right. So, I mean, to push these things sort of from the dictatorial end of the spectrum, on the other end of the spectrum, which is also, in my experience, not very workable, are those leaders that always have to get to full consensus. 100% of the time, everybody has to be agreeable and so forth, and otherwise we are not proceeding on it.
Well, and that's you got to have a system, right? Those are the meetings that go on and on and on and on, and that's crazy. Also, you've got to have a system that gets to the root of the question, gets everybody's input on it without having one person dominate, and then get solutions out there. The solutions get documented, and bang, you're on the next issue. And I think you've spoken about this before, the magic of 3. because everyone's, okay, we've nailed this issue, now on to the next issue.
Right. So what about the tendency of always focusing on the latest fire drill, latest emergency?
Well, I mean, you're always going to have a little bit of that. We always start, when we're going through the weekly meeting, we have 9 critical numbers that we look at. Did anything urgent come out of those? Because we already figured out those were the critical lifeblood KPIs. Any issues there? Any issues with the to-dos? You were assigned to do a bunch of stuff last week. You took responsibility. Did that result in more discussion? Mm-hmm. We've all got these 90-day goals that we've set on. Is there anything, is somebody off track? And does that need to be discussed? Mm-hmm. So those are kind of all, let's call them proactive lenses to look through.
Right.
Now we get to the issues list, and we've gone through this accountability for the first 15, 20 minutes of the meeting. That may have added some new items to our issues list, but then we're going to add a dose of reality. What's going on this week? What's burning this week? Mm-hmm. Because now we've gotten, hey, maybe a KPI is off, and that's a new thing. But we usually have 1 or 2 things that, oh my gosh, so and so, we got to replace someone. Different things are going on, so we always leave room for the emergencies. Mm-hmm. But are they, when they're laid against everything else, is it really an emergency? If it is, okay, it's item number 1 and 2. Okay, we're not going to budge until we get at 1 and 2.
Of course. So let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of the meeting, in the sense of, so you have, 5 people in your leadership, right?
Yes. Yep.
We know from the practice of the weekly policy meeting, or level 10 meeting, as it's referred to inside the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS, that the actual issues list is actually baked into the agenda of the meeting. How does that actually happen in your particular case? In other words, where do you hold that thing? Is that on paper, or what do you do?
Well, we've had a lot of iterations of it, because we did it on Excel spreadsheets. The results of a meeting are action items. Mm-hmm. An updated issues list, an updated KPI, 13-week kind of where your metrics. Yeah. Who's responsible for what, and what's still an issue? Mm-hmm. Those are the minutes. And so we would have spreadsheets. And we were futzing a lot with the spreadsheets, and then you introduced us to 90, which is a software company. They created a dashboard and basically something that really mimics the EOS principles, the system behind EOS. So we started using that, and it worked pretty dang well. It's a little bit expensive, so we actually tried to migrate. I have some friends that are doing it with Google Sheets, and I liked the way it looked when they were doing it. It was very distracting to use spreadsheets and so forth. 90 really does a nice job of understanding EOS, the KPIs, the issues lists, the way everything flows, accountability, all the pieces that EOS has. It's very handy. We actually put it up on the wall. You couldn't have everybody with their laptops or something. We put the issues list up on the wall. Mm-hmm. And it sounds so simple, and it really, really is simple to have a list on the wall and work through it in a systematic fashion. There is no magic to it. It's the discipline of it, right? There's no magic in waking up at 5 a.m. and exercising, right? It's the discipline of doing it.
I'm curious, in your dynamic, on your kind of leadership team dynamic, how do those answers come across? I mean, like, what prompts people to say, okay, I want to add the issue number 14 as being the second most impactful or important issue today?
The more you do this weekly, every single week, you get a lot more proactive. You get a lot more, and maybe it's just my team, the teams I've been blessed to work with, but people are calling other people's issues up to the forefront and saying, I want to hear more about that. Because again, issues are not always bad. Sometimes it's about a software upgrade, could be about a policy, could be about a company policy that people want to see changed.
It's what we call in EOS informational issues. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they're discussion, but it's still like, we want to discuss whether we're being true to our core values in our hiring procedure, right. Something like that. And that was raised by somebody else, but hey, I want to talk about that this week. Lots of times, if you stay, this is that momentum. This is what traction's all about, right? If you have these meetings every week, there are less emergencies because you solved them. You didn't discuss and then poof, you actually discussed with a solution, and then you did it again next week, and you did it again next week. And if you didn't have enough time, we have special meetings once in a while with so many big issues or a big issue. We'll have its own meeting, just banging out on that one issue to resolve it. And it's about resolving it. It is not about endless meetings, not one bit. This is all about impact and results.
Got it. So actually, I'm just curiosity, on average, how many issues are on your issues list?
Anywhere from 15 to 30 on the active list.
Have you ever heard of the issues list getting, like, for example, too long, that people start feeling overwhelmed?
Too short. That's the sign of an ineffective meeting to me. As a leader, are you really pulling from your team enough? Do you have enough? Are they engaged or not? I mean, having those are the meetings I try to sit in on. Right. All of a sudden, it's like, what do you mean? That's the beauty of the traction software, right? I can see everybody else's results. Are there enough action items? Is the to-do list, the issues list, I don't say long enough, but is it meaty enough?
Well, time is running out, Paul, once again. Any last thoughts?
Well, I just can't stress enough how simple this stuff is, but not easy, and how important it is to have a system, because that's what it's all about, having a system to address and work through these meetings, and consistency matters. So I'm going to say the same thing I say on every one of these, Serge. You start on third base, and it's, who wants to start at home plate? And with a coach, you start on third base. And I was going to try to self-implement this. I had all the material, and I looked through it, and I said, I'm going to save myself a lot of time and a lot of money, and I'm going to hire a coach. And, I didn't regret one bit of that.
Well, thank you for your endorsement once again.
And I just want to thank you, Serge. I really appreciate being invited onto your show, and I'm looking forward to our next 12-minute conversation at Operationally Speaking. And until then, I want everyone to know, lead with wisdom, enthusiasm, and clarity.
Well said, Paul, and goodbye, everybody.